there's a real sort of philosophy to William Shatner, and it's an accessible, it's a simple philosophy. The film itself is sort of philosophical, right? It's cosmic in a way, but I think he boils it down um, to simplicity in a way that I think people can really relate to.
Hello, everyone. Talal Azim here from Popcorn and Soda, and I have the privilege today to discuss the release of the documentary William Shatner, You Can Call Me Bill, which depicts the life of pop culture icon William Shatner as told by himself. We are fortunate enough to be joined by the director of this documentary, Mr. Alexandre Philippe. Alexander, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much. Really happy to be with you.
My pleasure. And I want to congratulate you on the upcoming release of the documentary. Now, I had the opportunity to watch this, and it was a very different take on the genre, just based on how it's shot and how the story is delivered, which I really enjoyed. Now, for generations, there's so many different introductions to William Shatner, whether it's Star Trek, Boston Legal, Priceline, or even Family Guy. What was your introduction to William?
I grew up in Switzerland, and for me, it was definitely the entry point was Star Trek. I was definitely watching a lot of genre, movies at the time. A lot of sci-fi, a lot of horror, and yeah, I mean, for me, that was it. But I've been really intrigued by William Shatner, the man. I mean, this is a guy who's had essentially an 87-year acting career, right? He started at the age of 6. So, we're talking about someone who has essentially worn thousands of masks, over an incredible career. And so really this particular film is about, William Shatner taking off the masks and trying to get to the bottom of who he is as a person.
And when you have this pop culture icon like William Shatner, who's influenced so many creatives worldwide, there's definitely a big lineup of them waiting to want to tell this story. So, can you talk about how you originally came on board this project and what attracted you to it?
It was very serendipitous. I had been working with Legion M on a previous project called Memory: The Origins of Alien. They picked up the film at Sundance in 2019. So we had a great working relationship. They're really wonderful people. It's a great company. It's fan owned company. And I'd heard that William Shatner had become their spokesperson a couple of years ago. So I just gave him a call just to sort of catch up on things and just very casually sort of dropped the question. Has there ever been a documentary made about William Shatner? And they said, well, he's been approached by many documentary filmmakers over the years, but he's always said no, but we can try. So I know that they pushed. I had made a similar yet very different sort of one-on-one film about William Friedkin on The Exorcist. And so I know they were able to share that with Bill, and eventually Bill accepted to meet me for lunch. I was fully prepared to sort of pitch him the idea for this film and how I wanted to approach it. It's a thematic structure. I mean, it's an unconventional film, really. It's an unconventional biodoc, if you will. But what was interesting to me, what really struck me, is that he didn't really want to hear a pitch. He was very curious, as he is as a human. He was just very curious about me. He kept asking me questions about, life and the universe and what do I believe in. I mean, we got really sort of deep and existential, over the course of this wonderful lunch. And by the time it was over, he basically said, "When do we start?" And so that was that. I think we connected, on a just purely human level. And then I think it was also the right time. I think he was ready to tell his story, and he was ready to delve into themes, uh, that were very personal, things that meant a lot, that mean a lot to him at this point in life. And it was very clear that there were going to be no taboo subjects. We could literally go anywhere with him, boldly go anywhere with William Shatner.
Yeah, that's just so well said because this is such a very personal story that's told by William himself. And that's one thing that I find so fascinating about this documentary is that it's broken up to different chapters, and it really like breaks away from the usual tropes of
Yeah,
documentaries, which I find so refreshing. So we get to hear like William's story in his own words from him. So can you talk about the production of this documentary and why the
sure.
team decided to shoot it in this specific way?
So, basically what I wanted to get to is this sort of distillation of the essence of William Shatner. And he sent me um, the lyrics to a number of songs that at the time were unreleased, um, that were autobiographical. And then I read all of his books. And so there were a number of themes that started sort of coming up to the surface that I felt were really where his mind and his heart were at. Like these are the things that William Shatner really cares about. So the approach was essentially thematic. Each chapter reveals a different facet of William Shatner, right? We shot in a 10,000 square foot stage, completely bare, completely stripped, no artifice, no set building. Again, the idea is about, this is William Shatner unplugged, if you will, taking off the mask, revealing himself for who he really is. But each chapter had a very distinct feel. So we shot with three cameras, two on tripods, one on a slider. And I worked with, my longtime director of photography, Robert Muratori, on making sure that each chapter had a very distinct look that was evocative of the theme at hand. So we shot for 3 days, 3 days of interviews. We had a morning session, an afternoon session, and each session was essentially dedicated to one of the chapters. The difficulty about this is that you have to make sure when you're shooting one chapter that you're getting everything you need for that chapter. It's not like the next day, because
Yeah.
once you break that set and then you go to the next one, you can no longer go back. So there was a lot of pressure. In I mean, you had to be very, very precise in the approach. And thankfully, Bill is an extraordinary storyteller, obviously. And it wasn't too difficult, I think, to steer him where I wanted to. But there were lots of surprises. I mean, as he says himself in the film, it's this process of delving into his life is of a process of discovery, both for him and for me. And there were a lot of really surprising moments, I think.
Yeah, and talking about surprises and just the process in general, like for you personally, how was it getting to know Bill throughout this process and things that, preconceived notions you had about him that you found to maybe not be true or even vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've been a fan, but I think, and I've appreciated over the years what he stands for. I mean, he stands for, he clearly very, strongly cares about the environment. He's a very caring human. But I was just really just blown away by his work ethic. I think that what he gives every day of himself, to his craft, to the fans, is really remarkable. I mean, I have, now that I've gotten to know him a little bit, I have a lot of admiration, certainly, but also a lot of affection for him. And I think that the messages, there's a real sort of philosophy to William Shatner, and it's an accessible, it's a simple philosophy. The film itself is sort of philosophical, right? It's cosmic in a way, but I think he boils it down to simplicity in a way that I think people can really relate to. So and I think those messages, are very important. This idea that we need to care about our planet, that we need to, try to live a meaningful life, to be good to each other. It's not rocket science. You know what I mean? And and I think especially in this day and age where there seems to be so much polarization for just about everything, we tend to forget that we're all human beings, and that we all have loved ones, that we're all here for a very short amount of time on this planet, and that we should really try and make life better for not just for ourselves but also for future generations. And so to me, this film is really about William Shatner, the man, essentially being a sort of surrogate grandfather, right? And who is here to remind us about our humanity and our role on this planet.
It's so interesting you bring that up, the concept of like nature and just the environment in general. And there's this overlaying backdrop of the documentary, which uses nature, the environment, trees as this metaphor to tell William's story. So, and the concept largely of being around for decades through paradigm shifts, and then, trees have always been around. And in many ways, like Bill's been around for the majority of like the Earth's population in terms of just his 9 decades on this planet. So, for you personally, like what was the importance of that concept of the environment and the nature being used to portray his story?
Well, what I think is really interesting, specifically with Bill, is, and I don't want to give too much away because it is part of the epilogue of the film, is that when he passes, he has made arrangements to essentially have his ashes put into the ground and have a redwood tree planted over his ashes. So he wants to be a tree, which I think in itself, is such a in terms of the image itself, I think is really beautiful because this is the man that we associate with, you know, we'll always associate him with Captain Kirk, right? He is the guy who boldly, boldly goes where no person has gone before, and so for this person to essentially want to come back to our planet and be rooted in the soil as a tree, it's kind of a full circle journey, and I think it's a really meaningful journey. It's a Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz kind of journey of like going over the rainbow and coming back home. But this it's a reminder that no matter how much he encourages to boldly go to experience things, to go out there, and live your life fully, that at the end of the day, this is our home, this is our planet. And so this is intimately tied to the environment and how important this is, and it should be for us and for future generations. So the journey is not just poetic, it's really meaningful. I think it's a meaningful message for all of us.
And lastly, Alexander, what do you hope audiences take away from Bill's story?
Well, I mean, I think beyond all the messages that I've just mentioned, some people have said, people who know him have said to me that, watching You Can Call Me Bill is as close as you'll get as, essentially spending 90 minutes with Bill himself. But, if you were just sort of going into, I don't know, like a pub, cracking open a beer and just having a conversation about life and death in the universe, right? And so I think for people who are curious about him, and people who may even have second thoughts, quite frankly, about him, or who have heard bad things about him, just give him a chance. I think if you're curious about this man and his legacy and what he's done, just it's worth spending 95 minutes. And I think, as you've said earlier, I think it's a film that has been surprising people, and I think will hopefully continue to surprise people.
Well said. And once again, Alexander, I want to congratulate you on the release of this refreshing take on the documentary genre. I had a
Thank
great
you.
time. You're most welcome. I had a great time with this documentary, and I believe audiences will as well. I wish you all the best, and I truly appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.